Hi everyone, it's Alice, and today we're gonna take a look at some nonfiction books that I would like to get to this year. I always say I'm really bad at sticking to TBRs, and usually I am, but for some reason I tend to do better with nonfiction TBRs, and for the nonfiction books that I had on my TBR for last year, I actually did quite well. I read a good chunk of them. There are some that I didn't read though that are gonna pop up on this list as well, but you know, you can't win them all. I do always like a portion of my reading to be nonfiction though throughout a year because I usually end up really liking them, and I like learning new things. I like reading people's stories, so I have a stack of books to show you and all of them look excellent. The first one that I have is one that I think has made an appearance on this list. I don't know, I think maybe this might be the third year. Still haven't read it, but I still really want to. Maybe this year is the year. It's The Invention of Nature by Andrea Wulf. This is a biography about Alexander von Humboldt, who was a famous scientist of his time and like a visionary naturalist. And I think one of his then radical ideas was that nature is all interconnected and complex, and it's not just there to use for humankind, which I feel like is sort of obvious, at least to most people today. He's kind of been forgotten though, so this book is all about bringing his extraordinary life to the forefront, and I think I'm gonna love this book. I actually kind of know that I'm gonna love it because I have actually started this once and I read about 50 pages, but I ended up putting it back down because I just wasn't in the mood for this kind of book, and I wasn't really in the mood for a bigger nonfiction. I think once I get back into this though, I'm gonna love it, but I have to be sort of mentally prepared for it because it's a longer book and the font is quite tiny and quite dense. A thing I really like about this book though is that it has images and like illustrations throughout the text, and it's not just all gathered in the middle of the book. Even though these are black and white, I kind of prefer it this way. And then there are some color photos in the middle as well. I feel like, I don't know, I really like when books do that. I guess it doesn't really matter, but yeah. I really like that. I'm sure I'm gonna learn a lot from this book. It's just a little bit intimidating, like the size of it. Although, now that I'm looking at it, this whole thing is just credits and like references. So it's not actually that long, but yeah. I think I'm gonna love this. The second book I have is also a biography. It's actually a book I just picked up in a bookshop a few days ago. It's Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley. This is a book that has just popped up everywhere for me lately. I don't really know, but I've seen several people review this book, talk about this book. I've just seen it around a lot, and it really made me want to read it. I don't really know a lot about Jane Austen or her life, so I think this is going to be very interesting. I think this book is structured around the places that she lived when she was alive, and it seems like she moved around quite a lot, and we explore these spaces, and through that we get to know Jane Austen. And I'm really looking forward to this. I've heard a lot of things about this author, and it seems like she's a little bit divisive. Like, some people really like the way she writes, and some people don't. I think that her tone, I guess, is a little casual. I don't really know, but it seems like it's not everyone's cup of tea, but based on the reviews that I've seen of this, I think I'm really gonna like it. I do also really like this edition. It's very pretty. And again, this has photos in it like a lot of nonfiction book has. I don't know who these people are, but I'm excited to find out. Then we have a memoir slash book about nature and science and animals, and I feel like this book is basically a classic at this point. It's In the Shadow of Man by Jane Goodall, and as I'm sure you know, Goodall is a world-renowned primatologist, conservationist, and humanitarian, and this tells the story of this research that she did in Tanzania in the 1960s where she studied chimpanzees, and I guess it's about the study that she did and everything she learned, which was a lot. It was like really groundbreaking at the time. I'm really looking forward to reading this, not just because I would like to know a little bit more about Jane Goodall, but I'm excited to learn more about chimpanzees. I really don't know a lot about apes and monkeys. I feel like there's a gap in my knowledge when it comes to that. To be fair, I have a lot of gaps in my knowledge about a lot of different things, and maybe I don't need to know, but I would like to know. I would like to learn more. There are also photos in this book, like black and white photos. I think this is going to be super interesting. Next, we have got another memoir. It's a bit of a shorter one, actually. It's The Salt Path by Raynor Winn. And this tells the story of the author who, just days after learning that her husband of 32 years was terminally ill, they lose their home and their livelihood. Which sounds like, I don't know, I think this book is gonna make me cry. It sounds really sad. I think they end up making the decision to walk this particular path, which I think runs from like Somerset to Cornwall or something. It's long, and I guess the story is just about them going on this journey. Guessing it's about the husband who's ill, and I don't know how they survived this or how they made it, but I just think it sounds really interesting. I've also heard really good things about this. It sounds like one of those books that's going to be really sad, but also really beautiful. Another memoir I have is Notes on a Silencing by Lucy Crawford. This is another one of those books that has made an appearance on this list for a few years. Still haven't read it, but here we are. It sounds really, really good though, and I've heard so many good things about this, and it leans a little bit more into true crime though, and it seems like it's going to be a little bit darker. It's about the author who went to this New England boarding school, and while she was there, she suffered this assault. And then I think years later, she finds out that the school is under investigation for these kinds of things. And she, like, I think the police ask for people to come forward, and she comes forward, and her case is reopened or opened for the first time. I'm not quite sure. But she like gets dragged back into it, and through this investigation it comes out that there was this whole system of like silencing people and just avoiding this, I guess, and the school was more worried about their reputation. And it sounds like it's going to be a really harrowing read, but it's also one of those books I just feel like I'm going to love and I'm going to think is really interesting. And every time I see this book, I'm like, yes, I'm gonna love that. The next book I have sort of the same situation going on with this as I do with the von Humboldt biography, where I have started this book and then I put it down because I just wasn't ready for it and I wasn't really in the mood for it. But I loved the part that I read, so I do know I'm gonna love this one. It's Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe. This is a history book with some true crime to it, and I think it focuses on the history of the Troubles in Ireland. And it focuses on this case of this woman who was a mother who was abducted from her home in the 70s, and she was never seen again. And then I think in 2003, they find these bones on a beach, and it turns out to be this mother, which is really sad. I really do not know a lot about the history of the Troubles or really Ireland in general, and so I think I will learn a lot from this. I do think though that I'm gonna have to be in the right mood for this because I think it's gonna be kind of a tough read, so I want to pick this up at the right time, but I think I'm going to learn a lot from this. Also, every time I mention this book, some of you will be like, you're gonna love that book, it's amazing, it's one of the best books I've ever read, so I'm sure I'm gonna love it. I just need to be like in the mindset for it. Switching gears a little bit, we have a book about modern art. I really am interested in like too many things. It's almost a little bit annoying. But it's What Are You Looking At by Will Gompertz, and like it says on the cover, it's a book about 150 years of modern art, and I feel like I really do not know a lot about modern art. One of my favorite things to do though is to go to museums and look at art and paintings and sculptures. Like I really enjoy that, but I don't feel like I have a deep understanding of it, and I definitely do not always understand modern art. And this is all about like what modern art is and like what is art, and I think it's gonna be very interesting. There are some pictures in this as well. I think there are pictures throughout. as well as like colored photos in the middle. I don't know. I think I'm gonna learn a lot from this. This is the kind of art where I struggle, where it's just like, it's a table and a tent. Like, I don't really get it, but I wanna understand it, and I wanna understand what I'm looking at. I do actually, though, think maybe when we enter like photography, I'll know more, because I can see that Cindy Sherman is in this book, and this is one of the photographers that I learned about when I went to photography school back in the day. So I do know a little bit about that, I guess. But there's a lot of other stuff that I really don't get. Then we have a book by an author who I've read a lot of books from, but I haven't read this one yet. It's Eiger Dreams by Jon Krakauer. And I just want to read this because one of my areas of fascination in life are people who climb really dangerous and tall mountains. Like, I just think it's so interesting. And I've read several books about it. I love watching documentaries about it. There's just something about it that I think is so fascinating. I don't want to do it. I just want to read and learn about other people who do it, because I just think it's strange, and there's this obsession around it that I don't really understand, but I just think is fascinating. This is a collection of essays, though, I think, and it's all about these different expeditions, I think, how they did it, why they did it, the people, and I think it's going to be really interesting. I have read Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer, and it's one of my favorite nonfiction books. That's also about a mountain climb, and I love that book. And I just think this is going to be interesting. It's also, again, quite short. It's like 180 pages. Second to last, we've got More Nature with The Flow by Amy Jane Beer. And now that I'm talking about this book, have I hauled this yet? I can't remember, but I got this a while ago, and I feel like maybe I forgot to put it in my most recent haul, but I got this book in a bookshop. I just thought it looked really interesting, and it's one of those books that combines memoir with nature, and I really like those books. It starts off, I think, with this tragedy where the author loses her best friend when they are on this kayaking trip, and I think the book is about her sort of rediscovering her connection to nature years later, and it's especially about her connection to like water and being on water, and I think this might be about water and rivers and stuff a little bit in general as well. I don't know. I've never heard anyone talk about this book, I don't think. I just saw it and I thought it looked interesting. Lastly, we have More Nature, but this is more about like climate change. It's The Story of More by Hope Jahren. I've had this for a while as well. I have also read another book by this author called Lab Girl, which I really liked. So I know I like this author's writing. I just haven't gotten to this book yet. It's also not that big, so I should just read it. I think what happens, honestly, is just that I get really distracted by other things. That's it. The author of this is a geobiologist, though, and I think this is sort of her letter to humanity, talking about the consequences of what we're doing to the planet, and it's separated into several parts. We have life, food, energy, and earth, and I think that's going to be very interesting. I really like climate change books when I'm in the mood for them, I guess. I like learning about these things, but it sometimes makes me feel a little depressed too. Although nothing is worse than The Uninhabitable Earth. Like, that book was so, like, it is nonfiction, but that book really messed me up, and it still is messing me up, to be honest. But yeah, I do like reading about climate change, and I feel like this is gonna be a little bit more hopeful than The Uninhabitable Earth, although to be fair, it doesn't take a lot to be more hopeful in that book. Those are all the books in my stack for today, though. So many interesting books, and even though I'm not that good at sticking to TBRs and I'm not super rigid about it, anytime I make these kinds of videos, it does inspire me to read more, and it like reminds me what books I want to be reading, so I do really enjoy making them, even though I don't always end up reading all of the books. But hopefully I will get to at least some of these this year. I would love to know if you have read any of the books that I mentioned and what you thought, and if you have any nonfiction books on your TBR for this year, I would love to hear about it. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!